Welcome back, everybody, to FreightWaves Now on this Friday morning. We're continuing the conversation around the impacts of the Supreme Court decision to not hear the case of AB5, how it now will be going into effect in California. And to do that, we've got some continuing conversation from Paul Brashear, who is Vice President of Drayage and Intermodal Services at ITS Logistics, and Brandon Roberts with us, Head of Carriers for Dray Alliance. And so, guys, thank you both for being here. We're going to kind of dig into what this actually means on the drayage side of things and at the ports, because we know a lot of the independent contractors employed in California, or working in California, that is, are these people who are running drayage in the ports. So let's, Paul, start off with you a little bit. Can you give us just a kind of a current snapshot of what the independent contractor market looks like in California, specifically when it comes to drayage drivers?
I would say about 75–80% of all of the drivers going in and out of the ports of California are owner-operators. And a lot of that relationship is a carrier-to-owner-operator model. So this is going to affect pretty much most, if not all indirectly, all of the drivers that go in and out of the ports. And, this couldn't happen at a worse time. Things were getting a little bit leveled out here in California. And this is going to be a significant setback to the progress that we've made when this goes in effect in 7 days. One of the things that I would say shippers need to be aware of is gravitating towards people that have more of a broker to carrier model. That seems to be the best path forward for a lot of these carriers to absorb this owner operator capacity and kind of check that box for AB5.
And Brandon, to bring you into the conversation as well, when we look at this sweeping decision or indecision right now from the Supreme Court, do you see that there was any kind of potential unintended consequences, as sometimes there likely are, and that's really going to be really hitting the supply chain hardest?
As mentioned, there are this option of the broker to carrier model that might be able to absorb some of this, but there are likely some carriers who might have failed to plan and are now scrambling. And if there is a large transition of leased on owner operators to true independent owner operators, that might be some friction in the short term. Or if there's a large transition of leased on owner operators to employee drivers, that might also be some capacity that would be transitioning in the short term as well.
So the response from this indecision by the Supreme Court has been kind of wide and varying. We had some response from OOIDA earlier in the show today, who they were concerned, of course, for the kind of function and the well-being of the owner-operators as well. We've got a statement from the California Trucking Association that was released yesterday as well, the group that originally brought the case into the court system. They said that gasoline has been poured on the fire that is our ongoing supply chain crisis. And in addition to the direct impact of California's 70,000 owner-operators, they now have 7 days to cease long-standing independent businesses. The impact of taking tens of thousands of truck drivers off the road will have a devastating repercussions on an already fragile supply chain, increasing costs and worsening runaway inflation. I think that this is a really interesting point as well, because for these companies that maybe really heavily rely on independent contractors, they're going to now have to weigh the option of bringing them on as W-2 employees. And that, of course, comes with salary increases, taxes, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Paul, when we look at this for these companies who are maybe using them as leased on independent contractors, now having to take them on as W-2 employees, where does that increased cost incurred by these companies go? Does it then get pushed further down into your transportation cost and eventually into your inflationary pressure? Or is that cost just kind of lost into the ether eventually?
No, that's going to be directly pushed on to the BCO or whoever's paying the freight bill. I mean, if that doesn't happen, then folks go out of business, and that's going to increase rates because you're getting rid of supply. So at the end of the day, I think the only way that we're going to navigate this and really help out our BCOs is finding a way to capture this capacity as it goes out, because I can't foresee a lot of folks, especially some of the small to medium-sized companies, bring these guys on as employees. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of scrambling for the trucking companies to set up some kind of brokerage arm or some kind of aggregate capacity solution to bring them on and continue to pull. At the end of the day, this is going to affect companies' ability to pull containers out. It will take capacity off the market. Outside of California, I mean, we're in 33 markets throughout North America. We're actually seeing folks take their trucks and a lot of this capacity out of California and position it to places like Houston, Miami, Jacksonville, Savannah, not just because of AB5 and the regulation, but there's also a lot of demand that's shifting east as folks try to avoid the labor strike. Funny now that maybe the labor is not going to be the issue as we go into peak. It's going to be this situation, and that capacity will leave that state one way or the other, and it's going to be who's positioned as a provider for our clients to coddle and collaborate with all these drivers to get them under some kind of stable situation where they can continue to execute in LA and Long Beach and Oakland as well.
So that kind of covers it from the company side, but I want to take a look at this from the driver side as well. A lot of these drivers who choose to participate in our supply chain as independent contractors do so because they don't want the limitations that being a true company employee kind of puts on them. So, Brandon, my question for you is these drivers who are making this choice to be ICs, they kind of have the autonomy in their business where they can choose what they're doing, where they're running, who they're contracting with. They also have the ability to pick up and leave California if they don't necessarily want to. Granted, that's a little broad. It's much harder than to just, pick up and take your truck elsewhere. But can you talk a little bit about that? What type of decisions now do these independent contracted drivers have to make when it comes to who they work with? And will that lead to some of them choosing to leave the state altogether?
Yeah, that's a great question. As folks are coming from maybe a leased on arrangement to what we call a true independent contractor where they get their own numbers, they become a lot more independent and have some more portability. And so there is the opportunity for these newly created independent contractors to be able to chase higher rates elsewhere or follow the market, whether it's between drayage or to over the road, or we've also seen the other way. When drayage rates are up in LA Long Beach, we have some new folks who come in from out of the area to help with that capacity. So it does make it a little bit more portable in that sense. And just to echo what Paul said, as a broker model, we've been able to sort of aggregate a lot of that capacity and hope to be able to address that, at least in the LA Long Beach area.
And Paul, excuse me, throwing this one to you. When we look at California, the infrastructure still has a long way to go, but there's really nothing like it when we look at the U.S. With this decision or indecision now that we're seeing, do you see a potential for a lot more activity to be routed to the East Coast for the time being, even though there's not that quite infrastructure there to handle any kind of increased activity at the same level as the West Coast?
That's a great question. And we're already seeing that. We actually started seeing this January of this year, and that was either an RFP or, folks were just booking to get stuff anywhere in North America. And as we got into this year, hedging to stay out of California, all this volume started going into the East Coast. New York, New Jersey is in bad shape right now. They're severely stripped from a capacity standpoint, infrastructure standpoint. We're starting to see that in Savannah. We've seen that in Charleston throughout the year as well. So, outside, I would say out of Houston, which is faring fairly well right now, we're seeing the East Coast bear the brunt of all of this demand. And, it's very possible we could get back to a place that we were about 12, 15 months ago where, the vessels are going to dwell for, weeks, capacity struggle to keep up with that. The chassis situation will always be a concern, especially on the East Coast, which is going to mean folks like ourselves or other trucking companies are going to have to deploy grounding operations to keep the chassis in play, and kind of execute from some of the lessons that we learned from 12 to 15 months ago, to keep that container flow coming out of the ports and not allow chassis to dwell too long at DCs or sitting in yards.
Brandon, last question for you before we let you go. If you're a driver in this situation and you're starting to look at strategies to soften the blow or soften the impact that this would have, what's one strategy that you would suggest that they implement going forward?
Yeah, as a carrier, we would strongly encourage to get your own numbers. If you don't, at Dray Alliance, we have exclusively worked with independent owner operators who have their own numbers, who are able to run their own business. We stick to our lane in our expertise in communication and dispatching, and let the truckers do the trucking, so to speak. And that's an excellent option. It allows still this business to business transaction to happen, and is also pretty flexible in that arrangement. So that's something that I would recommend looking at as a path forward.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for adding your perspective and kind of the firsthand perspective to this conversation. We're going to be keeping a watch on it as well. You guys have a great holiday weekend.
Y'all do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Man, we're going to take a short break, but don't worry, we'll be right back with more Freight Waves Now.